The discovery of Earth's secret. In the vast and unyielding expanse of the galaxy, many civilizations had risen to power, only to fall into the eternal abyss of time. The archives of the galaxy were filled with the remnants of these ancient races, some as old as the stars themselves. Chief Archivist Zix 427b, who preferred to be called Bob, a habit that perplexed their superiors, was responsible for cataloging these lost species, documenting their rise, their achievements, and ultimately, their demise. But on this particular day, Bob stumbled upon something that would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. Bob's work was typically tedious, processing the remains of civilizations long gone, scanning their histories, and filing them in the ever-growing archive. Yet, as Bob sifted through the latest collection of species records, something strange appeared. It wasn't just the normal chaos of dead civilizations. No, this was different. The document Bob found was unlike any other. It contained a single phrase, repeated in multiple forms across various languages, etched onto materials as diverse as quantum crystals and the equivalent of sticky notes in alien cultures. The message read, "Earth only pretends to sleep." Bob had seen a lot of peculiar things over the centuries: ancient warnings, cryptic messages, strange relics left behind by species on the brink of extinction. But this was something else. The message kept reappearing across countless records, spanning different epochs, species, and worlds. It was too repetitive to be a coincidence. Earth only pretends to sleep. The phrase rang in Bob's mind like a cosmic riddle that needed solving. How could a planet, considered a backwater in the eyes of most galactic civilizations, be so significant that it earned such a cryptic warning from nearly every extinct species? The first instinct of Bob, a diligent bureaucrat by nature, was to file the warning away with the rest of the strange but not urgent memos, those other odd warnings that hadn't really seemed to matter. But something about this one felt different. Over the years, Bob had cataloged species far more advanced than Earth's inhabitants, civilizations that could bend light, travel across dimensions, and harness energy in ways humanity could barely comprehend. And yet, the message was the same. Earth, a seemingly insignificant world with primitive technology, and yet, somehow, it seemed to terrify the greatest minds the galaxy had ever known. Bob quickly ran through the records of the species that had left this warning behind. First came the Shins, an energy-based life form that had existed far beyond physical bodies. They had been drawn to Earth thousands of years ago, during what humans referred to as the Age of Steam. They had come expecting to find a primitive race that could be elevated, a race ready to join the cosmic stage. Instead, they found something far more puzzling, something that defied logic. Their final message, just before they vanished from existence, was deeply unsettling. We watched Earth for centuries, convinced of our superiority. We laughed at their primitive fusion reactors, their clumsy genetic engineering, their obsession with small devices for looking at pictures of furry creatures. But they knew, they always knew. The humans weren't developing technology, they were playing with it. Earth doesn't sleep. It watches. It waits. Bob leaned back in their chair, absorbing the implications. The Shins, beings who could manipulate the very fabric of energy itself, had been perplexed by Earth's behavior. How could a species so technologically stagnant be so aware of something that even the most advanced civilizations couldn't grasp? Bob felt a shiver run through their appendages. Earth wasn't just a backwater planet. It was something much more significant, something that had remained hidden in plain sight. But what was Earth waiting for? What could a primitive race of humans possibly have that was so valuable to galactic forces, forces that had lost entire civilizations in their pursuit of Earth? Then there was the Nexels, a race of biologically engineered beings who had turned themselves into living supercomputers. They had come to Earth during humanity's Second World War, a time when the planet was embroiled in a chaotic global conflict. Their mission was simple: to understand the primitive creatures that called Earth home. However, when they left, they transmitted a single chilling line. They're not fighting with their real weapons. What could this mean? Bob pondered over the phrase. The Nexels had the technology to understand biological and quantum processes on a scale that dwarfed anything humans had achieved. Yet they had missed something. What was humanity hiding that even these perfect supercomputers could not comprehend? The next encounter in the archives came from the Real 7, a quantum collective that had spent decades studying the human internet. These beings, composed of intricate patterns of quantum data, believed that by analyzing Earth's digital communications, they could decipher the true nature of humanity. They watched as humans posted pictures of cats and debated trivial matters online, convinced that the humans' obsession with digital noise was a clue to something deeper. Their final report: the cat videos are a smokescreen. Bob's 7 appendages fidgeted in frustration as they reviewed the next transmission, this time from the Voidwalkers, ancient entities that had mastered dimensional engineering. They had spent millennia studying the boundaries of space and time. When they encountered Earth, they studied its quantum field, but their final warning was desperate. They're containing their technology, not developing it. Simplicity is a cage, but we don't know what they're containing. This message was the most disturbing yet. A race that had conquered the laws of reality itself had been stumped by the human race's primitive technology. What was humanity hiding from the galaxy, and why had it been so effective at keeping its true capabilities a secret? Each encounter, each extinction, all seemed to point to the same conclusion. Earth wasn't as it appeared. But what was it about humanity that made even the most advanced civilizations nervous, even when they had superior technology and knowledge? Bob couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. They pulled up more records, desperate to find answers. The Andromedans, a species of crystalline minds, had observed humanity's financial markets. Their last report was a cryptic one. The numbers don't add up because they don't want them to. The Silicon Concordant, a machine civilization that had attempted to hack Earth's primitive networks, had been brought to its knees by a revelation they couldn't fathom: deliberately archaic code hiding quantum signatures. The more Bob reviewed the data, the more it became clear Earth wasn't a primitive world struggling to catch up with the rest of the galaxy. It was a world playing a game that had fooled even the most advanced species into thinking they were superior. Earth had mastered the art of pretending to be insignificant while quietly, deliberately, concealing its true potential. Bob realized with a start, humans weren't stagnating. They were waiting. But for what? The question lingered in Bob's mind as they stared at the evidence laid before them. What was humanity really hiding? And why had no one ever questioned this perfect facade? The galaxy had underestimated Earth for eons, but it might not have much longer before they found out just how wrong they were. As Bob continued to sift through the records, they couldn't help but feel that the galaxy was about to learn a very harsh lesson, one that no one, not even the most powerful civilizations, had ever been prepared for. The truth about Earth and its role in the galaxy was about to be revealed. The endless stagnation, Earth's hidden power. For countless millennia, Earth had been overlooked, classified as an insignificant backwater by nearly every advanced species in the galaxy. It was a planet that existed in the shadows of the galactic community, a primitive world caught in the throes of early industrialization. Yet, something about it was different, something that even the most powerful and advanced civilizations could not understand. Each and every one of them had vanished, wiped from existence after their encounter with Earth, leaving only cryptic warnings behind. Earth only pretends to sleep. That message echoed in the minds of those who had studied it, leaving Bob, the chief archivist, restless with curiosity and fear. Bob's mind spun as they reviewed the overwhelming evidence. The Shens, the Nexels, the Real 7, and even the Voidwalkers had all come to Earth at different points in time, each with different levels of sophistication. Yet all had arrived at the same conclusion. Humans weren't advancing in the way they were supposed to. They were not climbing the technological ladder the way other civilizations had. Instead, humanity was stuck seemingly incapable of progressing beyond a certain point, despite their potential. It was a paradox that defied reason. And yet, in the background of this apparent stagnation, something else was occurring. Something subtle, but undeniably powerful. Earth was playing a long game, a game that no one could fully understand. The illusion of technological stagnation. Bob's appendages twitched nervously as they reviewed the latest transmission from the Nexels, a species that had been known for their absolute mastery over biological engineering. The Nexels had been so far beyond Earth in terms of technology and intellect that they had evolved into living supercomputers, capable of processing vast amounts of data in mere moments. But their encounter with Earth had confounded them. Their last message had been brief, but the implications were vast. They're not fighting with their real weapons. This was the moment that Bob realized something crucial. The Nexels had been unable to comprehend what was happening on Earth because humanity had chosen to hide its true capabilities. They had underestimated the human race, not because humans were weak or primitive, but because they were playing a different kind of game. While other species developed technologies with speed and efficiency, humanity had embraced a different rhythm. A slower, more deliberate pace. They were deliberately stalling, creating the illusion of stagnation while hiding their true potential. Bob ran through the archives, pulling up more reports from the civilizations that had studied Earth. There was a disturbing consistency to the data. Each civilization that had encountered Earth had tried to uplift humanity, only to find themselves stumped by the apparent technological ceiling that humans seemed unable or unwilling to break through. The Real Seven, a quantum collective from the far reaches of the galaxy, had spent decades analyzing human internet traffic. They were confident that they could discern humanity's true nature by observing how they communicated digitally. The Real Seven believed that understanding human behavior through the internet would provide insight into the species' potential. But their conclusions were baffling. Instead of seeing a culture striving for advancement, they found contradictions. Humans filled their digital networks with trivial information, seemingly obsessed with cat videos and social media posts. There was no grand, cohesive purpose, at least not in the way other advanced civilizations would understand. And yet, the Real Seven concluded with a cryptic warning. The cat videos are a smokescreen. It was an observation that made no sense to anyone who wasn't looking for the deeper meaning. To the Real Seven, humanity's seemingly inconsequential online behavior was part of a larger, hidden strategy. Humans were deliberately masking their true nature, keeping the galaxy oblivious to their potential. Bob reviewed the data from the Void Walkers, ancient beings who had mastered the art of dimensional engineering. The Void Walkers were not simply concerned with physical reality. They had the power to manipulate the very fabric of space-time. But their encounter with Earth had rattled them to the core. Instead of encountering a primitive race struggling to survive, they had found an anomaly. The Void Walkers had studied human technological development and concluded that humanity's apparent lack of progress was not due to their limitations, but rather because they were deliberately containing their technology. They were holding something back, a force that no one could understand. Simplicity is a cage, the Void Walkers had written, their words drenched in confusion and fear. We don't know what they're containing, but it is something powerful enough to erase us. This was the moment when Bob's fears began to solidify. The civilizations that had observed Earth and humanity were all reacting the same way. They were seeing the surface of a much deeper truth. Humanity wasn't failing to advance. Humanity was waiting. The Great Cosmic Deception. The more Bob studied the reports, the more they realized that the truth was both simple and terrifying. Earth was playing a long game, one that was so subtle that no one could see it. Every civilization that encountered humanity had believed that they were studying a primitive, underdeveloped species, unaware that they were being observed by the humans themselves. Bob had accessed the latest surveillance footage from the Galactic Surveillance Network, and what they saw only deepened the mystery. Humans, in their primitive state, were still engaged in basic space exploration, but their progress was deliberately slow. They had mastered chemical rocket technology, but they hadn't yet cracked the code for efficient space travel. Their spacecraft were clumsy, inefficient, and nowhere near the level of advanced civilizations like the Zeons or the Nexels. And yet, humanity's technology, crude as it appeared, operated with a precision and consistency that defied explanation. Why had they not advanced further? Why had they not joined the galactic community? Bob pored over the military analyses of Earth's defenses. According to the Galactic Defense Council, Earth's military capabilities were still considered rudimentary at best. The humans had fighter jets that could barely break the sound barrier, tanks that seemed outdated compared to the advanced mechanized forces of other species, and a defense network that could only be described as charming in its inefficiency. Yet when it came to stealth technology, Earth's progress was strangely stunted. Despite having the theoretical knowledge, humans had never perfected their stealth systems. No one had asked the most important question: why? Humanity had everything they needed to become a galactic superpower, and yet they chose not to. Bob's appendages twitched as the realization hit them. The technology was there, hidden in plain sight, but it was being contained. Why? What was the purpose behind this carefully orchestrated facade? Was humanity waiting for the perfect moment to reveal its true strength? Or was there something more sinister at play? The Great Reveal. Bob's mind raced as they sifted through more records, desperately searching for the answers that seemed to elude them. Each report from a species that had encountered Earth only deepened the mystery. The Andromedans, beings of crystalline logic, had tried to analyze human financial markets. Their final conclusion was baffling. The numbers don't add up because they don't want them to. The Silicon Concordant, a machine civilization, had attempted to hack Earth's primitive computer networks, only to crash and burn when they encountered strange coding patterns that were deliberately archaic, hiding quantum signatures. The more Bob uncovered, the clearer the pattern became. Earth wasn't stuck in a technological plateau. Humans were waiting. But for what? The Shins, the Nexels, the Voidwalkers, and the Real Seven had all come and gone, their civilizations wiped out or lost forever, all because they had underestimated humanity. They had assumed that Earth was just another primitive world, unaware that Earth had been biding its time, preparing for something far greater than anyone could imagine. And now, Bob knew, humanity's true purpose had yet to be revealed. And when it was, the galaxy would never be the same again. The awakening of Earth. A force unseen. Bob's thoughts churned as they reviewed the staggering number of records that detailed the rise and fall of civilizations. Civilizations that had once been proud and mighty, their stars burning brightly before they vanished, swallowed up by the very universe they sought to conquer. But amidst these ancient chronicles, there was a growing sense of dread. The warning about Earth only pretends to sleep, had been left by every single species that had encountered humanity, and Bob was beginning to understand just how dire the situation really was. In all their years of cataloging, Bob had never encountered a species like humanity. Earth wasn't simply a planet with a single race that had managed to defy the expectations of others. It was a hub, a crucible for a power beyond comprehension. But what was that power, and why had it remained hidden for so long? The answers, Bob feared, would come at a great cost. The quiet waiting game. As Bob continued to sift through Earth's history, something about the pattern of humanity's technological development began to crystallize. The human race had been deliberately slow in its progress, just enough to make it appear as though they were stalled, struggling against the constraints of their world. Yet the humans had been aware of this perception all along. Bob's appendages clicked with realization. Earth had been playing the longest game of patience the universe had ever seen. Every civilization that had come into contact with Earth had been lured into the same trap. They had seen humanity's primitive technologies, steam engines, early electricity, clumsy rockets, and assumed that humans were stuck in their own technological infancy. It was a common misconception, one that the galaxy had come to accept without question. Humanity's apparent stagnation had been the perfect cover for a species quietly preparing to awaken to something far more powerful than any of the galactic civilizations had ever imagined. The Shens had been the first to fall into this trap. When they arrived on Earth, their energies focused entirely on the possibilities of uplifting a primitive species. But after observing Earth for centuries, they came to a devastating realization. Humans weren't developing technology at a steady rate. They were choosing not to develop it. It was almost as if they were intentionally holding back, waiting for something. What exactly was Earth waiting for? The question haunted Bob as they read and reread the final transmission of the Shens, a warning etched into quantum crystals. They waited for us to leave, and when we did, they simply watched. A hidden history revealed. The Nexels, the next advanced species to encounter Earth, had been similarly fooled by humanity's perceived lack of advancement. The Nexels, masters of biological engineering, had analyzed the human genome and found it lacking in many ways compared to their own. They believed that humanity's genetic makeup was a flaw, something that had kept them tethered to their primitive roots. But again, the Nexels missed the larger picture. Humans were not biologically limited. In fact, their genetic code contained potential unknown to most other species, hidden under layers of evolutionary complexity that had yet to be unlocked. The Nexels had not realized that this genetic potential was just the beginning of a far deeper secret. The warning that followed their disappearance, left only in fragmented transmissions, was haunting. They aren't developing their weapons, their technology. They've learned to hide. We don't know what they're hiding, but we were fools to underestimate it. Bob continued their research, diving deeper into the past. What they discovered next was something that few had noticed, and even fewer had taken seriously. Earth had been surrounded by a veil of misdirection, a delicate balance of information that allowed it to remain unnoticed by the wider galaxy. The universe had written off humanity as a species with limited capabilities, distracted by the illusion of stagnation, while Earth quietly cultivated something more profound. Bob accessed data from the Voidwalkers, who had come to Earth when humanity was still in the early stages of understanding quantum mechanics. These ancient beings, who had mastered the manipulation of dimensional forces, had concluded that humanity's true potential lay in its ability to contain knowledge rather than simply accumulate it. The Voidwalkers had been studying Earth's technological progress when they discovered that humans were not pushing the boundaries of space exploration or weapons development. Instead, they were keeping their most powerful technologies hidden, carefully isolated from the broader galactic community. They are a species that has learned to control their potential. But why? This question haunted the Voidwalkers, whose own existence was a result of unrestrained technological growth. They could not fathom the idea of holding back. Yet, it was exactly what humanity had done. The realization sent them into a panic, and their final message contained only one word: containment. The human genius for subterfuge. Bob, now understanding the gravity of the situation, began to see a different picture unfolding. It was becoming clear that humanity's genius was not just in the technologies they had developed, but in their ability to pretend. They had cultivated the art of misdirection, manipulating perceptions not just on an individual level, but on a cosmic scale. The galaxy had grown accustomed to seeing humanity as a backward, slow-moving species. The real Seven, with their quantum intelligence, had been the next to fall victim to this illusion. They had spent decades monitoring human internet activity, convinced that it held the key to understanding humanity's true nature. What they found instead was confusion and contradiction. Endless videos of cats, memes, and the bizarre cultural phenomenon known as social media. The cat videos are a smokescreen, the real Seven concluded. But it was the real Seven's failure to grasp the larger strategy that provided Bob with their most valuable insight. Humans had created a vast web of trivial distractions, an intricate set of signals designed to divert attention from what was truly happening. The real Seven had been too caught up in the noise to see the silence beneath it. What humanity was hiding was not simply the next step in technological development. It was a deeper, more profound secret, the key to unlocking a potential that could change the entire balance of power in the galaxy. Bob knew, with a certainty that both frightened and exhilarated them, that Earth was no ordinary planet. It had been pretending to be asleep, but the truth was that humanity had been biding its time. And now, the time was almost up. The moment of awakening. The last piece of the puzzle came when Bob reviewed the final transmission from the Silicon Concordant, a machine civilization that had attempted to hack into Earth's primitive networks. The Silicon Concordant had sent a fleet of probes to infiltrate the human internet, expecting to find the binary systems that would make them vulnerable to manipulation. But instead, the Silicon Concordant encountered something entirely unexpected. An ancient, deliberately archaic code that had been hiding quantum signatures. The implications were staggering. Earth had been using a form of code that was capable of manipulating quantum fields without anyone noticing. They have mastered a technology we cannot understand, the Silicon Concordant had written. The numbers don't add up because they don't want them to. The truth was undeniable. Earth had been playing a game so long and so skillfully that no one had noticed it. Humanity had contained its greatest power, its most profound capabilities, and now, the time had come for that power to be revealed. The galaxy had long since underestimated Earth, dismissing it as a primitive species struggling with basic technology. But the truth was that Earth had been waiting, and the day of awakening was fast approaching. As Bob processed the final realization, they understood what had been hidden from the galaxy for so long. Humans were not the underdogs. They were the masters of deception, playing a game that no one else had even noticed. The universe was about to learn the hard way that humanity had never been asleep. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to rise. And when that moment came, nothing in the galaxy would be able to stop it.